So Carson Price for Wednesday, October 16th, 2024, coming to you from the Nation Network studio built by Arbor Lee here at the historic Wall Center, downtown Vancouver. And if you're heading to a game, extend your stay. Book a Carson Price right here at the Wall Center exclusively. Call the hotel 604-331-1000. Tell them we sent you. Some blackout date supply based on availability. Mansa Harris alongside Blake Price. Mike, four-time Juno Award winner Mike Rogerson hitting switches, conducting things. Big show coming up after a third consecutive loss for the Vancouver Canucks to open this 24-25 season. More on that in a moment. But first, we'll start with our poll question. And a different format on the poll question today. DeBrusk, Miller, Besser, Höglander, Pettersson, Garland. Thumbs up or thumbs down to organizing the top six and taking DeBrusk away from Petey after just 3 games into the season.
But
ultimately, vote at the Carson Price X and YouTube channels.
But ultimately, a loaded, the most pedigreed NHL caliber goal scorers, all put together.
Those are your best goal scoring wingers with your 2 best centermen. And we're asking this because they come out of the box and score 4 goals in that first period against the Calgary Flames in the season and home opener last week. They have scored 4 goals in the 8 periods and 2 overtimes since that first period. Last year, this was a JPAT stat, through 3 games, Miller, Petey, Besser, and Hughes through 3, 6 goals, 19 points. This year, 3 goals and 8 points.
Oof.
So I voted yes. I voted thumbs up on this. As you mentioned, Blake, this consolidates your best goal-scoring wingers with your best offensive centerman. It gets a left and a right shot winger for each centerman. It gives Petey 2 worker beasts in Höglander and Garland. And it gets DeBrusk perhaps better real estate. Well, definitely better real estate right now alongside Miller and Besser. Let's see it happen. I know they want to create depth. I know they want to have 3 scoring lines. You looked at this team going into this season and went, wow, they got a lot of talent there, especially on the wing. They should be able to fashion 3 lines that can threaten and then 1 line that you hope just checks or stays neutral. But let's load up the top 6. Let's see what that'll do for Thursday in Florida.
So I'm halfway. I'll load up the top 6, but I won't do it like this. And I don't predict that they'll do it like this because after years of saying that Elias Pettersson doesn't have a proper winger, to take away the marquee offseason signed winger away from him after 3 games.
That's the downside.
They're just not going to do it. So I think if you want to do this, you can have your cake and eat it too a little bit here. You don't have as elite a top line here, but you move Höglander up and keep DeBrusk where he is. Still got these 6 in the top 6, but you just do it a little differently.
I can hear your mouth there, but I don't talk it several times during the summer. Talked about DeBrusk with Miller and Besser. He seemed quite intrigued by that trio.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility.
No, and I think you can do it.
But I hear what you're saying.
When you need a kickstart in early December, I'd be more open to it.
You just think it's too soon.
Yeah. I think it's a kick in the shins to Pettersson, who
all right.
is probably
interested in what you folks think. Please do vote on the poll. And if you have any comments here on the YouTube stream, by all means, fire away. We'll see if we can get to some of them in this block. Top story brought to you by Yellow Dog Brewing, Neighborhood Brewing, Yellow Dog Spirits, and Foolish Winery. Still winless after a 4-1 loss to the Lightning in Tampa in what was effectively their home opener after their game last week was postponed. A goal from Connor Garland, the assists to Brock Besser and Jake DeBrusk. Artur Shilov stops 24 of 27. There's an empty netter there as well. The struggles continue for it's a 3-game losing streak now.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, got 2 loser points in the first 2 games. They did not have a 3-game skid
of any sort
until late February of last year, and it was a 4-gamer, and that was the only 3+ games.
We convinced ourselves, that was a 4-game regulation streak, but they must have had 3 games where they dropped
points,
but there were some OT points. No. They didn't. Back-to-back regulation losses was the worst it got until back-to-back losses, was the worst it got until late February.
And of course, that's when Elias Pettersson's struggles had already commenced, and they continue here. At one point yesterday, Pettersson was being outshot 8-0 by the Tampa Bay Lightning. It finished up at 10-4 at even strength, and his line mates last night, DeBrusk 8-3, Heinen 7-2, weren't much better. And then perhaps a bigger indignity is Pettersson wasn't out there 6-on-5. This is a second straight game where in a third period, late stage scenario where Rick Tocchet has chosen not to use number 40. So
he was a little bit more sprightly in the final 40 minutes. You know, the wraparound attempt comes to mind. And you're not going to score on a wraparound attempt on Vasilevsky much, but the fact that he showed the get up and go to quickly wrap around the net like that, it was something that was a sign of life for me. Still passed off shooting opportunities, particularly on the power play, where you'd think, just rip it, man. And that one time where he passed it up, and it's like he gave it to Hughes, and immediately Hughes turns around and was like, no, you. and then he shot it the second time. But it seemed to be almost like Hughes was like, dude, you're the shooter. Take the shot. And but it's coming. Slowly, I think it is coming.
Yeah, I mean, yesterday we asked, is it too early to be worried about him? And I voted yes, it's too early. I want to see a larger sample size. Thursday in Florida, Saturday in Philly, they're big. I think you got to see Elias put his imprint on one of these 2 upcoming games. Because if it's 5 straight quiet games off the top, then I think a lot of people who are willing to give him leash, like I was, are going to start turning. And we've seen that in the market already, that there is a whole lot of frustration with Elias Pettersson, particularly after the big contract extension. You know, people going back to and we were having this discussion at the beginning of last year. Oh, the Canucks have to prove to Elias Pettersson that they can forge a winning organization. Oh, think of how that
the power dynamic has shifted there.
It sure has. I mean, now, they've forged at least a winning season. We'll see about organization, but they forged a winning season, and now they need Elias to step it up and forge more than just a winning season and second round playoff appearance. Of course, hearkening Patrick Alvin at the end of last season with this, we haven't achieved anything yet, and the hard part starts now. When we thought he was going to come out and bask in the glow of what was the most successful Canucks season in some time, perhaps bubble playoffs accepted, he came out and said, no, we're not satisfied here. The hard part is just.
By the way, Kurt's in the chat with a small wrinkle on your plan too. Brock JT sprung DeBrusk PD Hogue.
In terms of goal scoring talent and goal scoring ability, I think you can put, and certainly goals over 60 minutes, because that has been one of Daniel Sprong's calling cards in his NHL career. He belongs with this group of wingers in that realm. But you know, it's one thing to do goals per 60. It's another thing to do it and hold down a top 6 role. Like, to hold down a top 6 role, you're required to do more than just score goals. I mean, unless you are, one of the most, Ilya Kovalchuk could play in the top 6 and not have to see his end of the ice. But those are very few and far between guys. going back to Boudreau's criticism of Höglander, right? You're going to be a 35-goal guy. I can live with some of the defensive deficiencies, but not at the 20-goal mark. All right. What are our friends at Yellow Dog up to?
Well, they like to tell you that the Squirrel Chaser Hazy Pale Ale back on special again during the month of October. So go check it out at your favorite government and private liquor stores. Tall packs, 4 packs.
Fancy can, too. Really looks good in a fridge.
The green one?
Yeah.
It's a little different. Yeah, not all the green cans.
No, it's a beautiful can. Yeah. Okay. So the first period was wretched last night for the Vancouver Canucks. Tocchet said they weren't ready to play. The second period was much improved. They had chances there. Ratu on a breakaway. More on him in a moment. Kiefer Sherwood. Garland in tight hits the post. Besser off the rush. Problem is, after 2, your deficit had increased. It had doubled. It was 2-0 for Tampa. Can't blame She Loves on the opening goal, but the second goal. And first of all, what I'll say is that was a textbook breakout from the Lightning. That was an effortless zone entry. That's a very nice pass from Jake Gensel, a very talented player. And that's a hell of a shot from Braden Point, a world-class player. It's not a goal from distance, but mid-range. And that's the one where I think you're hoping to make the save. At least that's the one that Tocchet said in the postgame. I want to see that one again. Maybe you want the save there. Third goal, Tyler Myers is just not tying up Anthony Cirelli in front of the net. And Tocchet overall said about Artur Shilovs, he was fine. Fine is a 4-letter word beginning with F.
Yeah, it was, and you have to hear the tone too that it was said in, which is exactly how you think fine sounds.
Oh, so Mike, why don't we get that clip ready then about Tocchet on the goaltender Shilovs last night? Look, defensive posture, which of course was one of the Canucks calling cards last year, one of the underpinnings of their success, has still been pretty good here this year. A lot of people want to castigate the defense, particularly that third pair, where Desharnais already been a healthy scratch, where Juleson has had his struggles, including on the first goal last night, where Forbert is, he's not exactly a modern NHL defenseman per se. But from JFresh Hockey, the Canucks 7th in the NHL at 2.21 expected goals against per 60. I do think some of the defensive miscues that have happened have been more accurately pinned on the forwards than the defensemen, although, a little column A, a little column B there. And look, that's pretty good. That's a mark that, and we said this last year in the first half when they were shooting at an incredible percentage and getting saves at an incredible percentage, particularly against the grade A and high danger chances. I mean, Demko was extraordinary early last year when they did give up the grade A's, and they didn't give up a ton of grade A's. And then the flip side, you had all these shots, all these goals coming with an inflated shooting percentage. And look, the worm is turning on them here a little bit. It turned on them in season last year as it went along, and it's turned on them a little bit at the outset of this year. Yeah,
I mean, they had some good fortune. I mentioned on Twitter that if they win tomorrow, they're still at 4 points in 4 games, same as last year. But then Jeff rightly said, well, then you got to go 8-0-1 to keep up that pace. That's true too. But if you nibble away at that 8-0-1 over the next 9 games, if you go 6-3, you're still not that far off, and you make sure you don't have your February swoon. So you just want to keep last year's pace within arm's reach, and they win tomorrow night. They can do that, but they don't seem very close to that right now, do they? And it's perplexing given the credit we gave to the organization and building a roster that on paper looked pretty darn good. But hey, we had questions about the defense, and I think defense and goaltending is probably the bigger concern. They could have outscored their problems, I suppose, if the offense was clicking better than it has.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think those other foibles are still a lot to overcome.
Okay, let's hear from Tocchet on the goaltender, and then we'll hear from him sort of at large what he thinks after 3 games. But here's Tocchet on She Loves.
Yeah, I think he was fine. I think the second goal, I got to take a look. I don't know if I like that one, but in the most part, I think he was fine.
Okay. Short clip. It's fine. Move on. Fine.
Well, and here he is on the bigger picture of the 0-1 and 2 start.
We need some guys to dig in a little bit. We're kind of in the corners or the ends of our stick. It's been happening a couple of games now. We got to make sure that we get a little bit grittier in the corners.
Mm-hmm. It's a long season, 82 games, and veterans that have just had a decent year. It was a decent year getting to Game 7 of the second round. And it's subconscious. I'm not saying they're thinking that as they go into every corner. But you just know that your life's not at stake right now. Like,
no.
And
that's totally normal, Blake, for a team whose last memory was playing in some of the highest stakes games they have ever played in their life against a team like the Edmonton Oilers with 2 of the very best hockey players in the world. Yeah. And we're seeing this a lot from athletes across a whole fleet of sports who are sitting there and looking at regular seasons now and going, boy, my club and my league are asking me to play. In the case of a hockey player, if you're going 4 rounds to the Stanley Cup playoffs, you're north of 100 games. It's an extraordinary ask.
Getting into a car crash almost every night with the physicality. Like, baseball's a long season, but doesn't take the physical toll on you that hockey does.
Mm-hmm. So athletes measure themselves. They're load managing. Teams are in many ways now facilitating this. And to have the focus, to have the energy, to have the desire on a nightly basis is, in a lot of players' cases, too big of an ask.
And you can't tell me that's not happening in Colorado and Edmonton right now.
Of course it is. And now I'll say this. I think Tocchet is an exceptional communicator. And one of the things that I've loved about the way he has messaged is he has taken that on. We've heard him say so many times, hey, maybe you don't have it tonight. Maybe you're not feeling particularly great, but guess what? You still need to be a contributor. You still need to find ways to help our team win a game. And frankly, when I'm reminded of those sorts of remarks from Tocchet, and when I hear them, I think squarely about number 40. He strikes me a little bit, Blake, as in horse racing, they'll say, some of these thoroughbreds, they can be world-class, the best pedigree, have an incredible history. Something's just not right that morning. Sometimes they don't run. PD has got to find a way to contribute, and sometimes it's defensively, right? Because we know he's got defensive chops. Sometimes it's going to have to be defensively as a shutdown guy. And I realize you're not just paying $11.6 million for a shutdown guy, but on the nights where he doesn't have it offensively, doesn't have the burst or is passing up the shooting opportunities as you outlined, be a lockdown defender. Do something else that's constructive to your team's chances.
Well, also,
like Quinn Hughes last night.
If you turn into a 75-point, 80-point player instead of a 100-point player, but like you're a Selke award winner, it sounds like Patrice Bergeron I'm describing.
Something like that.
Then people will forgive that too. Well, they'll forgive the lack of 100 points, but
for sure,
when you're getting outshot 10-0 to start a game, people are going to be saying, what do we get out of the $11 million?
A Bergeron, a Modano-like player, right? Where you're not the otherworldly stats, or at least not often, but you play that complete game. And look, Hughes is busting his ass last night. I mean, coming off a career-high 31-plus minutes Friday against Philadelphia because the injury to Myers, and incidentally, good that Myers is back. May not have had his best game yesterday, but good to see he didn't miss any further game action after what looks like a very scary injury when it first happened.
Quinn found a lot of open ice.
Yeah, he had 10 shot attempts last night, 6 of them blocked. He's the -2, but
he was making stuff happen.
He was absolutely making stuff happen.
And
exploiting the space that they gave him.
He was a dash too, but I think he led all skaters in that game. Maybe in Corsi, he was at 64.8%. O'Connor Garland was just above him. 35 shot attempts while he was on the ice for the Vancouver Canucks.
That is a lot.
35 shot attempts.
Incredible.
And this is just at evens. Just at evens.
Holy shoot.
In all categories, 42 shots were attempted by a Vancouver Canuck when Quinn Hughes was on the ice. He's but one man.
Early in the season. For those that aren't, shots and shot attempts works as a proxy for possession, right? More often than not, shots are coming from the offensive zone from dangerous places. So when you hear about shots and shots attempts with a player on the ice, it's because it's a good way to talk about how often they were playing offense.
And where the puck is, right?
Exactly. Where the puck is and how often you're playing offense, as opposed to not having the puck and having to play defense. Okay. The franchise era, as some are saying, begins.
It might be a bit too much for him.
It is definitely too much for Erik Brannstrom, the one-time 15th overall pick in the NHL draft, who, of course, was acquired by the Vancouver Canucks on the eve of roster setting from the Colorado Avalanche, where he had a poor camp and did not make that hockey team. Would have otherwise been put on waivers. Canucks got him through waivers and down to Abbotsford. He's played a couple games there, and now he has been recalled and will be, Irf Gafar had the news, and will be rejoining the Canucks in Florida in advance of tomorrow's game against the Panthers. The corresponding move is that Aatu Ratu has been sent down to Abbotsford, which means you're either going to see Pius Suter back at center, or Teddy Bluger is going to play third-line center, and Nils Åman is going to factor as your fourth-line center, although Suter could factor there as well. So, look, a great camp, a great preseason for Aatu Ratu. Showed some things in 3 games. You said you liked his game, but the fact of the matter is to recall Brannstrom, the Canucks only had 2 options available to them to send to Abbotsford without requiring waivers. One was Ratu, the other was Surrey's Archdeep Bains. So they have gone with Ratu. All right. Your thoughts on this?
Well, I think it's a worthwhile endeavor to bring Brannstrom in. As to who goes down, it's not a huge deal. I probably would have voted Ratu 51-49, something like that. Just because of the extra utility. He's been pretty good in the faceoff circle. He won 5 of 8 last night, for instance. And I think defensively and stuff, I think he was pretty good. That reach, the size, it's, his skating's improved. I like Ratu. Bains had a decent night too, and neither one of them was particularly bad.
Bains played 3 additional minutes, and minute 45 of that was on the power play. So he got power play time, Archdeep Bains did, whereas Ratu played no special teams.
And Ratu's younger, obviously. He's got the time to develop, so it's not going to hurt Ratu to head back right now. And it's worthwhile to bring in Brannstrom. Again, you wouldn't have batted an eyelash if the Vancouver Canucks had signed Erik Brannstrom in the offseason.
On July 1st.
Yeah.
No. I mean, the only thing you would have said is, I thought Tocchet and Foote prefer the bigger defenseman.
Right.
Can you play this guy and also play Quinn Hughes and be that small down the left side?
But this is a pedigreed guy who has played every night for the last 2 seasons.
Last 2 years, he's been a 70-game plus guy. Yep.
And he's been I think he was a plus player last year for the Ottawa Senators.
I can look
on a really bad team. Again, imperfect stat, but you would expect on a team like the Ottawa Senators, most of the defensemen to be heavily into the minus. So
he's been +5 the last 2 seasons with a bad Ottawa Senators team.
I mean,
playing 74 and 76 games.
That says something. Like I don't think he's going to be a disaster defensively, and he might help this team get on its horse just a little bit more quickly out of its own zone.
Well, he's a puck mover. He can skate with the puck. He fires a good pass. Now, I want to get to this tweet from our buddy Dave Hall of Canucks Army, because needless to say, there are things that have held this player back in his NHL development. There has been a failure to launch here. He was at one point viewed as the centerpiece, name-checked as the centerpiece by former Senators general manager Pierre Dorion in acquiring him from the Vegas Golden Knights in a deal that sent Mark Stone to Sin City. Here's Dave Hall of Canucks Army, who keeps a very close eye on the Abbotsford Canucks. I'm very curious to see how Rick Tocchet responds to Erik Brannstrom. In his 2 games with the Abbey Canucks, it almost felt that he was given the green light to run as a rover, hands and offensive creativity for days, but the total lack of defensive responsibility is very real.
Yeah. Yeah, at this stage in the game, he's right on that cusp of being an old dog in new tricks.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, at this early stage of the season, and incidentally, I've heard from some of you that, I'm even more worried about Pettersson because this is when you should be able to feast on points and goals, right? Like this time of year,
a lot of mistakes being made. Yes.
You get a whole lot more opportunities as offensive players than you do later in the season when systems and structures are a little bit more concrete and have had time to gel. At this stage of the season, Blake, over Forbert, 2 puck movers on the left side and Hughes and Brannstrom. Yeah, I'm willing to see that. Again, 4 goals in the 8 periods and 2 overtimes since the first period of the season. So, as much as we're looking at these defensemen and perhaps even the goaltender and saying, got to improve, not great. Yeah, no, completely see it. Everybody sees it. The Canucks need a second pair of defensemen. They might need 2 second pair of defensemen. But goals have been an issue. In fact, goals have been a bigger issue since the first period of the first game than the defensive side of the puck has been. So we'll see if Brannstrom can help in that regard.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a different look at the very least. I think it shakes the defense core up a little bit. They don't think that they're just fine there.
Nope.
They've had a shot across the bow now. Guys, we'll make changes if we need to.
And frankly, if Tocchet does want to institute more of a transition game and generate more chances off the rush, as he talked about right from the end of last season through the summer into training camp and preseason, then I do think he has to bend a little bit in terms of the profile defenseman he's using, because I'm not sure that Derek Forbert and I'm not sure that Vincent Desharnais and Noah Juleson can hit those long-range passes and create the transition that he's looking for as consistently as they would have to for that to take hold. This kid, Brannstrom, I think he's got a better chance of connecting on some of those outlet passes, those longs, more stretch-style passes that they're designed to either create a zone entry with speed or get a deflection where you've got the other forwards coming with a heavy and fast forecheck. I think if you want to incorporate that in your game, you need to have the defensemen who are able to play that style.
Do you dare insert Brannstrom and Desharnais, 2 guys that haven't played together, haven't practiced together? Do you change up the entirety of that bottom pair?
Yeah, maybe.
We'll see.
I mean, look, I think, and we'll see. I mean, we don't know for sure that Brannstrom's playing over Forbert, but stands to reason. Don't know why else you'd make this recall. But it looks to me like Forbert, Desharnais, Juleson, and now Brannstrom are kind of going to be like what we've talked about with the goaltending. Hot hand. Who's going?
Yeah.
You know what? If you don't hurt us in your 15 minutes that you're going to play as the third pair, let alone if you happen to do something constructive towards victory, you're back out there. When it's not going as well, we got other guys we're going to try. And you know what? Maybe at the very least, that's going to keep guys fresher.
Daniel Sprong back in your lineup tomorrow?
Yeah, I would seriously consider it. Yep. Again, you need goals.
Yeah. Power plays.
Yeah. And I love the Archetype story, and I love the training camp and the preseason that he had. And I think there's an NHL player there. But Sprong a minute 45 of power play time last night. Does that change things at all? Do you have a second goal on the board? Because if you have a second goal on the board, it's a different third period for Tampa.
It is.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Wanted to get to a couple of things from around the NHL here and then from our city. Alex Ovechkin last night, he reaches the 700 assist plateau. Of course, he already has 700 goals.
You mean right winger Alex Ovechkin?
He
played as a right winger yesterday.
Oh,
He's
typically been left winger, the right shot.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah. It caused a ripple. Right winger Alex Ovechkin?
Yeah. He is the 6th player in the history of the NHL to reach 700 goals and 700 assists.
The 6th.
6th.
Okay.
Who are the other 5? We like to play trivia sometimes with Blake Price. Couple are incredibly obvious here. There's a couple of
700 goals,
700 goals,
assists.
700 assists.
Yari Curry.
No.
No.
How are you not starting with the most
Okay,
obvious?
Gretzky.
Gretzky is one.
No, Lemieux wouldn't have got to 700 goals.
Very good, Blake. Because I had Lemieux, and sure enough, looked it up. He did not get to 700 goals.
Just by longevity, I'm guessing Brett Hull did.
No,
No,
not 700 assists.
No, yeah.
For Brett.
Yeah.
Wasn't exactly much of a passer.
No, I know. I just figured just longevity enough
Yeah.
time. But
Well, you're on the right track with longevity. There are 2 guys on this list where longevity is a huge
Brian
part.
Tocchet?
No.
Why
Why are you going for these deep cuts and B-sides?
So sorry.
Holy, like Gordy freaking Howe, man.
Okay. Yeah.
Jaromir Jagr. Come on.
Okay. What are we at there? 4?
Well, with Ovechkin, we're 4. There are 2 more. Both outstanding offensive players. Both long since retired. One of them our era as kids. One of them a little older than that.
Our era as kids. Okay.
Yeah. This guy would have retired in
700 goals.
Yeah.
One
of them is on the list of best player to never win a Stanley Cup.
Marcel Dion.
Marcel Dion of the, started with the Red Wings, but then the Kings.
I don't know that I would have put up with 700 goals. Okay.
Yeah. Marcel Dion, who remains 6th all time in NHL scoring with 1,771 points. He had 1,000 assists and 700 goals.
Yeah, I figured
he's ahead of Yzerman, Lemieux, Sakic on the all-time scoring list. And then one more.
More contemporary?
No, 70s.
Oh, 70s.
Mm-hmm. Kind of your, I'm not sure they used the term power forward back then, but he would certainly have qualified. Yes, very good, Blake. Phil Esposito.
Okay.
Of course, longtime Bruin, bids with the Rangers and the Blackhawks as well. He was 700, and he's actually, you got to go a little further down the list of all-time NHL scoring. Well, 11th to get to Espo. 717 goals, 873 assists. Sidney's going to fall short of this unless he's got 108 goals left in his NHL career.
He's going to fall short of it.
Well, do you think he's scoring 108 more goals? It's like 3 more 30 goals. 30
outside chance.
Okay.
I
think he'll probably fall short, but he's got an outside chance. And really, beyond that, you're talking about guys who are very long-term projections to get on this list, like McDavid's and, guys who are young enough that these totals are still a ways off, but you're expecting them to, keep on keeping on for 8 to 10 more years sort of thing. Touching moment in Columbus last night. I'm sure everybody saw as the Blue Jackets leave left wing vacant off the opening face-off and let the clock run 13 seconds to honor the late Johnny Gaudreau. Really nice touch by not only Columbus, and of course, it was their home opener and it was their opportunity to honor Johnny Gaudreau. We have already seen that in Calgary, which of course had a special affinity for Johnny for his first hockey team. And I got to hand it to Flames fans and Southern Alberta, the outpouring for this player who defected in free agency. I can remember all the disappointment, all the venom directed at Gaudreau that July 1st when he signed with Columbus. But to set all that aside and outpour as you have, Flames fans, Southern Alberta, has been truly heartwarming to see. And I'm sure incredibly appreciated by the Gaudreau family because, it can be difficult when you spurn a team to go back to that city.
Yeah,
right?
it hasn't been token reaction.
No,
it's been
it has
from
been
the guts.
authentic. Yeah. Absolutely. So a very touching moment there. And closer to home, a touching moment for Christine Sinclair, who played the final game of her career at BC Place last night, and she scored for the Portland Thorns, her club team, in a victory over Whitecaps Elite. And here's the other thing. Christine today elected to the BC Sports Hall of Fame.
Pretty big group of people. It's a huge class.
Well, it's usually a big class, alongside some guy named Ferraro you may have heard of.
Landing got in already, huh?
Some guy named Houston in the media category you may have heard.
Yes, congrats. Ray had to wait a good chunk compared to a lot of his colleagues at the same vintage. So
I was a little surprised that Christine wasn't already in, it must be said. I was like, oh, but I guess she's still active.
Yeah, I think that's you have to at least purport to have retired.
I was gonna say, if you were gonna put an active player in, she might have been the exception.
That's right.
Right? I mean, FIFA's all-time goal scorer, both men or ladies, Olympic gold medal, 3 Olympic medals. I mean, it's been quite a career. I mean, they're naming streets and schools and community centers after her. So she had quite a case. Anyways, congratulations to all of the BC Sports Hall of Fame inductees.
And pretty good attendance last night, by the way, to come see her. Almost 7,000 were in attendance to see Elite, and they're in tough. They are 16 and 17-year-olds with a handful of veterans taking on professionals. So they are in tough. They lost 6-0, but Christine Sinclair put on a show there late as she subbed on, so that's great. Meanwhile, the men's Whitecaps are officially into the playoffs. Remember, we've told you that already. Sale for the playoff tickets themselves, they're going to be on sale shortly.
Yes. So
keep your eyes out for that. But you can just sign up for the pre-sale by texting CAPS to 604-305-4530. That's 604-305-4530. Text CAPS, and then you'll get into the pre-sale, and you won't miss when those home playoff tickets go on sale. It could be one game. It could be 2 games. And if they advance past the second round, it could be even more than that. But keep up to date by signing up for the pre-sale. And for more information, visit whitecapsfc.com.
We have quite a show today.
We do.
I think I'm going to start calling it Nice Guy Wednesdays because the former assistant general manager of the Vancouver Canucks, Laurence Gilman, is going to reprise his role with us. Before the Leafs went and hired him away, we did Wednesdays with Laurence for, was it a full season or 2?
I think just one. Radio. I think just one.
Yeah, one. Now,
we got him hired. We were like an infomercial for Gilman.
Honestly, when he took the gig with the Leafs and he called me and he said, I just want to thank you. And he did the same with you. I just want to thank you guys because, being able to be out there in the public sphere and talking hockey, he said, I really think that helped. I was like, Laurence, stop. No.
Stop. But
your aptitude.
But go on.
I mean, your aptitude and, of course, that Canucks front office and everything they did that pushed the sport forward, fatigue management and everything else, the cap work, remember using the PTOs to get through preseason? We don't want to tucker out the Sedins or, some of the older stars. You
need to make that veteran threshold.
So they went out and they signed all these PTOs and threw them in the games. And the league went, what are you guys doing? Hey, you're not allowed to do that. We know what you're up to, and change the rules. Anyways, so we have Laurence Gilman on the show today. He'll be joining us each and every Wednesday. He will be doing so alongside Frank Corrado, former Canucks defenseman and TSN hockey analyst. That is today's menu. It's brought to you by Greta. We're going to be there Saturday for the first Canucks Army watch party of the season. Doors at 3, puck drop at 4. Tickets at nationgear.ca. This is in support of the BC Mental Health Foundation. There'll be prizes, trivia. Check out the street food menu there at Greta, as well as the arcade. The arcade is quite a draw there. 50 West Cordova, Greta Bar. Let the games begin. And before we get into our bets of the day, a big shout out and a thank you to Daniel and Arash and the team at Surrey Mitsubishi, who got me equipped yesterday, Blake, with a 2024 Outlander PHEV. Absolutely loving it. This is my first step into the hybrid era.
You'll enjoy
So I got
it.
my tutorial on that yesterday. Look forward to working with Daniel, Arash, and their fantastic team at Surrey Mitsubishi in Vancouver Mitsubishi. Bets of the day brought to you by Bet365, proud partner of Sekeres & Price. I was 3 for 3 with Canucks bets last week. Pretty proud of myself. Now, I didn't spike the football because there's only one guy in this studio who does that with a correct bet.
I was very close last night.
I am so accustomed to being right on these sports bets.
Is it? Yeah, you're the guy.
But I missed with had JT Miller as a goal scorer last night, and that did not come to pass. So I'm going off hockey today, and I don't typically pick NFL games on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. I usually leave it a little later in the week, unless it's the Thursday nighter. But this one caught my eye.
It is Wednesday.
No, I know. I mean,
okay.
When I make NFL picks in this segment, it's usually on a Thursday or a Friday going into the weekend or for the Thursday nighter. But Patrick Mahomes, he's 10-3 lifetime as an underdog. First of all, what's he played? 6-7 years? And 13 times in his career, he's been an underdog. Like, that's not a lot.
No.
And the other thing is I think he's San Francisco's daddy as well. Like, I would not be surprised if he continues to own the San Francisco 49ers. I'm sure they want revenge from last year's Super Bowl, but I don't know about you. There's just something comforting about being with Mahomes in Kansas City, having your money with them. It's a feeling I get with this team and this quarterback that I just don't get with any other team or quarterback around the league. And of course, they're going for 3 straight Super Bowls. So I'm going to continue. I don't need the point. They're a 1-point underdog. I'm going to take the champs straight up in the rematch, paying even money.
Last night, I was also close. I had the Flyers keeping the Oilers winless. That was a bet with my heart. Shouldn't have, but at 2-0, I was feeling pretty good about it.
There's 2-0 and 3-2.
Yes,
at a different
3-2 in the third. Yeah, they just couldn't hold on. It was a fabulous tying goal. So I'll vote with my head this time that the spoked bee brings the best out of the Colorado Avalanche at home.
Wow.
And that the Avalanche can beat the spread here too. Avs -1.5 to win their first game of the season at +185.
Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary. At Bet365, use code VANBONUS when opening that account. Laurence Gilman coming up next.
In a season like this, you never want to miss a single second of what's happening on the ice, and you want to be around your fellow fans, right? Well, Greta Bar YVR at 50 West Cordova, the perfect spot to do so. Hey, if you've got tickets, a great place to pre and post. They've got drink specials every single day. And if you don't have tickets, well, stick around and soak up the atmosphere with all your fellow fans, play all the great video games and air hockey, great air hockey set up as well at Greta Bar YVR. We'll see you there, 50 West Cordova.
Some price from the historic Wall Center. This segment is powered by Square. If you run a restaurant, you're probably too busy for this ad. If you're thinking about how to get more orders flowing, new locations opening, you need more customers, keep them coming back. So really, you're already thinking about Square because Square Restaurant Tech helps more than 400,000 restaurants do all those things and more. So when you're thinking about your restaurant, think bigger and think Square. Go to squareup.com/ca/en/campaign/big INRST, to see why Square is big in restaurants. Our next guest, a former NHL executive with the Canucks, Leafs, Coyotes, and Jets. And once upon a time, he did some radio in Vancouver.
He did indeed.
Couple of guys we know. It is our pleasure to welcome back to the program former Canucks Assistant General Manager, Mr. Laurence Gilman.
There he is.
Gentlemen, it's nice to get the band back together.
Yeah, it's a Wednesday, and here you are. For those who don't know, we used to do an hour with Laurence on Wednesdays.
Yeah.
Called it Wednesdays with Laurence Gilman. So it became a thing on our show for a number of years, and you were the forerunner of it. So thanks for doing that, and great to have you back here.
Well, it's nice to see you guys, and it's nice to participate.
Keep us up to date. Where are we talking to you?
I am in my condo, 1 block south of the St. Lawrence Market in downtown Toronto, a couple blocks east of the CN Tower.
And we get you as a free agent this year, correct? You were with the Leafs for a number of years, and that has come to an end. You're currently a free agent, is that correct?
For the time being, yes.
Yes.
I have had some discussions and currently am in discussion with a team or two.
Mm-hmm.
But, after 30 years of working in the NHL and 4 teams and being an assistant GM 3 times and interviewing for a handful of GM jobs, I figured it's time to take stock and see what I really want to do and who I want to work with and where I want to go. And I'm fortunate that I can take my time looking around.
Perfect.
And you follow him on Insta, you see his adventures, particularly time now with the kids, Laurence. So happy about
travel
that.
show.
Yeah,
How about that?
Wow.
Eh?
They eat pretty well too, as I've noticed.
Well, my kids aren't kids anymore. So.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. And we back in the day, you had 2 little ones here in Vancouver. Now they're all grown up. Hey, tell us about your Toronto experience. What was it like working for the Leafs?
Well, it's very. I had time to contemplate this question, and the Leafs, as you know, were the 4th team that I worked for, and the prior 3 teams that I was with, the Winnipeg Jets 1.0, Phoenix Coyotes, and the Vancouver Canucks were either owned by one individual, a group of individuals, or in the case of the Vancouver Canucks, a family, the Aquilini family. When I came to work for the Toronto Maple Leafs, I didn't sign a contract with them. I signed it with MLSE, which is a conglomerate. At the time, Bell Globe Media owned 37.5%, Rogers owned 37.5%, and Larry Tannenbaum owned 20%. And their portfolio of sports teams wasn't just the Leafs. It is the Leafs, the Raptors, TFC, the Argos, the Marlies, the Raptors G League team. They own Scotiabank Arena. They manage Coca-Cola Coliseum where the Marlies play, as well as BMO Field. The Budweiser Theater is under their purview. They have a multitude of restaurants and, Maple Leaf Square. It goes on and on and on. As a matter of fact, Rogers just agreed to purchase Bell's 37.5% stake at $4.7 billion, which, if my math is correct, values the operation at something like $12.5 billion. It's a major corporation with over 1,000 employees. And obviously, with that comes corporate governance and structure and a different method of operation. And I thought about it in the context of decision making. I recall, and we talked about this on our radio show at one point, in my first year with the Canucks, in our first training camp, we had 2 young players on entry-level contracts in Mason Raymond and Yannick Hansen, deservedly beat out 2 veterans in Matt Pettinger and Jeff Cowan. And we had to set our rosters, and we had to make a decision quickly. Mike Gillis picked up the phone. Francesco Aquilini came from the Aquilini offices to the boardroom of Rogers Arena. And we explained that if you really want a winning culture here, we need to make this move, and we need to put $1.8 million worth of hockey players in the minors without return. And he made the decision in a split second to allow us to do that. And I just don't think you're getting Edward Rogers, Mirko Bibic, or Larry Tannenbaum down to Scotiabank Arena to the boardroom in 15 minutes. That doesn't mean to say that the current president of the Leafs, Brendan Shanahan, doesn't have the authority to make a decision like that, because he's going to have to explain it at some point. But it's a very different method of operation. And then when you look at the Leafs in particular compared to the other teams that I worked for, it's a massive hockey operations department. I mean, you know, in its current iteration, the Toronto Maple Leafs, you have President Brendan Shanahan, GM Brad Treliving, and then you have 5 assistant general managers, 6 if you include Shane Doan, who's a senior advisor. You've got a player development department that has 10 people in it, whereas most NHL teams have half that. Like, it's a massive operation. There's a lot of moving parts, and at times it can be a little unwieldy. But you know, it's a fantastic organization, and it was a great experience for me coming here.
Okay, one thing the three of us all have in common is we've both worked in the Toronto and Vancouver markets. You weren't quite as front facing in Toronto, Laurence. I mean, here you used to speak on behalf of the club, and we're right there.
You got a lot of TV time in the box.
Yeah, you sure did.
Yeah.
But you know, juxtapose it. Tell us about the pressures of you know, what are the similarities, what are the differences between helping manage the Leafs and helping manage the Canucks?
Yeah, you were like Goldilocks. You had the baby bed in Winnipeg. You had then you know, I'd say the Canucks are in the middle sized bed, and then you got the big bed, which has the most comfortable ride.
Well, I mean, listen, I'd be lying if I said, you know, the most enjoyable part of my career wasn't in Vancouver, because it clearly was. You know, the irony, the funny thing is, and Matt, you touched on it, the only people, as you know, the Maple Leafs PR policy is that the only people who speak on behalf of the team are the president, the general manager, and the coach. In that vein, when I walked around the streets of Toronto, the only time I got recognized was by Canuck fans. So it's a lot, you know, as far as doing the job goes. And I never minded anyone coming up to me on the street, because, you know, hockey's, you know, we're not splitting atoms in this sport. Like, it's a great thing to talk about with a rabid fan base, but it's different. I mean, you fly under the radar, believe it or not. I mean, I don't think that's the case for the Brendan Shanahans or the Brad Trelivings of the world, but you know, you go about doing your business, and obviously you have all the resources in the world to do them. And you know, it's very interesting, and I say this as not just as a hockey executive who's worked in both markets, but as a person who's lived a fair amount of time in both markets. It's so interesting that in Vancouver, the perception is that Toronto doesn't really have fans. They have these corporate pricks who, you know, descend from their ivory towers on Bay Street or at the banks or the accounting firms, and descend into Scotiabank Arena in their suits and ties and go to their luxury suites and their restaurants, and they don't have skin in the game, and it's a soulless, you know, market in that regard. Ironically, the perception from Toronto is that Vancouver really doesn't have very many fans, and people care more about other things in Vancouver, like going to Whistler or snowboarding or you know, kayaking. But the reality, there's perception and there's reality. Vancouver Canucks fans, as you know, are incredibly fervent, deeply love the Canucks, and believe that, you know, live and die with each win and loss. Most likely at this point, they're dying with the losses. And the Toronto Maple Leaf fans are equally as rabid. And it's a crazy hockey town where people absolutely love their Leafs, and they live and die with every win and loss. And, you know, it's so funny, the perception that each city has about the other team's franchise, and it's just not the case. And I know that it's similar in Edmonton and Calgary and Winnipeg and Ottawa and Montreal. I mean, hockey is part of the fabric of the society of this culture, and it's you know, the same everywhere. People love their team, people root for their team, and you know, it's been great. I've had the luxury and the pleasure of working for 3 Canadian markets, and it's been an awesome experience in that regard.
With that as a backdrop, talk to us about starts to the season in both of those markets, or just in general, because you know, the Canadian markets are all experiencing very different emotions with regards to that. Some at the low end, like the Canucks and the Oilers, some at the high end, like the Calgary Flames. Did you, as an executive, put much stock into the opening 5 games of the season? Intellectually, we all know there's 77 other games. In the Canucks case, 78 more games here because they've only played 4. But was it hard not to have an opinion on what you'd seen through 4 or 5 games?
Well, I mean, there's a difference between 4 or 5 games and 2 or 3. And
right,
when you do this job, you need to maintain an even keel. There's an old expression: if you think like a fan, you'll soon be sitting among them. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be looking at the signs. Is your team ready to play? Is it good enough? Is your goaltending good enough? How's it being coached? And for sure, you might have reason to be concerned through the first 3 to 4 games, probably more so through the first 10, because what ultimately happens in the NHL is when you look at, it's very difficult for a team to overcome a very bad start. Obviously, the Edmonton Oilers did it last year, going from nearly the bottom of the league to having a chance to win the Stanley Cup in Game 7. But teams even themselves out as you move past U.S. Thanksgiving and into the dog days of the season in December, January, February. So the start that you have can really have an impact on where you fall in the standings later in the year. So the answer is, should you be concerned? Mildly. Should you be reactive to that? Probably not. I think you got to let things play out and see how they go for the first 10 games of the season. But I wouldn't be waiting much longer after that.
I know you wanted to ask him about making trade.
Yeah, I mean, at what point, like for the Vancouver, let's just use the Canucks as the example right now here. They've called up Erik Brannstrom, whom I think you probably know well from being out east at a time when he was with the Senators organization. He's something. He's a left shot defenseman. They need right shot more than anything right now, but they also just need puck moving. So he's an interesting experiment if they choose to use him in Sunrise, Florida tomorrow night. But really, they need a top 4 defenseman, like a legitimate top 4 right shot defenseman. Things don't look good in the bottom 4 of their defense right now. And so we're querying here at this early junction of the season, do they bother going to sign the journeyman guy on the sidelines, the Shattenkirks, the Schultzes of the world, to get mildly better? Or do you hold on to that cap space, as valuable as that might be, in hopes that the Flames crash out and Rasmus Andersson becomes available and you can put together the assets for that? The hopes that in December, January, you can find like a legitimate number 3 right shot defenseman. But if you wait that long, you might be sinking too low at that point.
Well, first of all, top 4 right shot defensemen do not grow on trees.
Nope.
National Hockey. They're not. That is not an easy commodity to come by. And to get a Shattenkirk or a Schultz right now comes without a cost other than the cap space that you're going to have to either, in the Canucks case, if I'm not mistaken, they have about $500,000 in usable space. So they would have to make a move somewhere, send someone down, put someone on waivers, whatever the case may be. I watched in anticipation. I did some homework getting ready, and I saw you guys did. We're talking about Timothy Liljegren from Toronto, who I'm very familiar with, who may be a player who's on the market. I don't know.
And he's in that middle ground there, right? He's younger at least, great. And you get the extra year, which may or may not be a benefit, but he's not legitimately a top 3 guy yet either.
No, but he might not be far off. If you look at his underlying metrics, he moves the puck very well. He's got a decent shot. He generates offense. He's just not a physical defenseman. And most coaches in the National Hockey League want their defenseman to be, Tyler Myers-esque, with Quinn Hughes' skill. But it's a difficult question to answer. I have to think that the Canucks and other teams are looking at the market. I mean, the GMs talk to each other every day, so they've, in all likelihood, are exploring their options and weighing out what is the better move to make to see if you can get a defenseman who, well, it's funny, in the NHL. And in the American Hockey League and in every other league, I've seen the same thing. In September and October, you have too many defensemen. Suddenly, the calendar turns to December, and you don't have enough. Mm-hmm. So I have always been, very cautious and careful about moving any defenseman at this time of year because things can change very rapidly. Players can get injured. You can have certain players get hot, and it's not an easy. Trading defensemen is not an easy maneuver, and it's not for the faint of heart. And if I were a team looking to move one out, I would be slow and steady. And if I were a team trying to acquire one, I would be aggressive in trying to do everything I could to get one. But it's easy to grab one of the players that's not currently with the team. If you don't have to give up capital, draft capital, or a player, it's a very good option as well.
Yeah. I'm interested in what you've made of the work done here by this regime with Rutherford and Alvin, Laurence. When they arrived on the spot, people thought it could take a long, long time to sort of unravel some of the bad contracts and cap commitments of the previous regime. Took a couple of years, and yet there they were last year vying for the President's Trophy and back in the playoffs as the number one, as the Pacific Division champion, the number 2 seed in the Western Conference. How they've done, how they do it. What have you liked about the way this regime is operated here in Vancouver?
First of all, Matt, you can't turn the Titanic around on a dime. It's not like the general manager can come in and put his or her stamp immediately on a team and change the fortunes overnight. It takes, a step-by-step plan that needs to be implemented. And I believe that the job that's been done in Vancouver by Jim Rutherford and Patrick Alvin has been not just good, it's been outstanding. They've made moves brick by brick. They've brought in great players like Philip Hronek, that have really made an impact. Jake DeBrusk, I think, was a really shrewd maneuver. But what I also like about them is that they're not afraid to make mistakes and admit to their mistakes and move on and take their lumps, as they did with Ilya Mikheyev. They brought Mikheyev in thinking he was going to be a top 6 forward. That clearly is not the type of player that Ilya Mikheyev is. And they assessed that. They took their lumps. They lost a draft pick. They moved a player, and they moved on. They've been decisive in their maneuvers. They brought in an excellent coach in Rick Tocchet, who I did have the pleasure of working with on the island of Misfit Toys in Phoenix, who's a tremendous hockey mind and a person who holds others extremely accountable. I can't say enough really for the job that they've done. And I think, yes, they're off to a bad start, but I think the Canucks are one of the top 4 or 5 teams in the Western Conference. And when they get their issues sorted, and particularly if Thatcher Demko comes back, they are a team that could compete for the Stanley Cup legitimately.
Yep. And I remember when they hired Alvin here, you were a big supporter of the move of a guy who had served his apprenticeship, moving up the ranks there in Pittsburgh and getting the big chair and the ability to impact an organization.
You mentioned Demko. Does the topic of goaltending just scare you? Like you had it so good here in Vancouver. Toronto has had a scattered record with goaltending, and now the Canucks without Demko. It's just a different world without Thatcher Demko. Goaltending's a funny thing, isn't it?
Well, as my good friend Alain Vigneault likes to say, my goaler is better than your goaler. I win.
That's the sport. Yes.
Your goaler is better than my goaler. I lose.
Yeah.
And that is why a good goaltender is worth his weight in gold. That's why Igor Shesterkin is holding out for as much money as he can get, because he is the reason the New York Rangers have a chance to win every night. I mean, they have a good team, but he's one of the top goaltenders in the National Hockey League. You cannot win without solid goaltending. It's not sustainable. It's not sustainable over a regular season. It's not sustainable in a 7-game playoff. So it's a critical factor for the Canucks. Not to say that Arthur Shilovs and crew can't, I don't hold them accountable necessarily for, the record of the Canucks at this point in time, but you need to have a bona fide number 1 goaltender or a tandem like the Bruins had last year with Swayman and Linus
Ullmark.
Yeah.
Do you think it screws with the team at all, the skaters? Do you think if they know that one guy is missing, that their cornerstone is missing, do you think it has at least a subconscious effect on the skaters knowing that he's not there? They say no, but do you think it does?
Of course it does.
Yeah.
Especially if your team allows the first goal. And I've watched it because I've been on teams, as you pointed out, with suspect goaltending. And it's a demoralizing factor for the players, and it takes away from their confidence and ultimately the rest of their game. So, as I said, you can't win in any league, let alone the National Hockey League. In any hockey league, you cannot win without good goaltending.
Yeah. Well, and Garland was saying this post-game last night. I mean, that second period, Ratu, Besser, Garland, there were a number of chances there. It's Andrei Vasilevsky, man. And that's one of the reasons.
They won the period and we're down more.
Exactly. Yeah, you won the period, but their goaltender is pretty darn good, and the deficit grew.
Yeah.
and turn into an L. All right, we've kept you longer than I told you we would keep you. He just kept asking you questions.
Good answers.
Giddy about having you back,
Yeah.
Laurence, and frankly, that goes for all of us here. Thank you for this. We'll catch up next Wednesday.
Well, thank you, guys. If I'm not gainfully employed elsewhere, I'll see you next week.
That's right.
It's happy hour on Sekeres and Price. Today's beer of the day from Yellow Dog is the Retriever Golden Ale.
Some price from the historic Wall Center, and this segment brought to you by Ben Moss. Ben Moss, proudly Canadian-owned, operated with a history dating back more than 100 years, 5 locations in BC, including Willowbrook and Langley and Coquitlam Center. Committed to customer satisfaction. Check out a large selection of Canadian mine diamonds, lab-grown diamonds, and mine diamonds available with payment plans to suit your needs. The helpful, knowledgeable staff will get you sorted. For more information, check out benmoss.com. Ben Moss, because love is timeless. Nice Guy Wednesday continues here on Sekeres and Price as we bring in former Vancouver Canuck and TSN hockey analyst, Mr. Frank Corrado. How are you?
I'm good, boys. How you doing?
Very well. Very well.
And don't worry, just because we brought Gilman in on your day doesn't mean you're getting waived or anything like that. I saw your tweet yesterday.
I was getting flashbacks, buddy. I was getting flashbacks. Not from the Vancouver waivers, from the Toronto waivers.
Oh, right.
Wow.
He waived you twice.
That one. Yeah.
Oh, boy.
We were in Boston. It was a game day, and it was a back-to-back. So only the guys that weren't playing went to the rink to skate that morning. And taking the bus back to the hotel, and I refreshed Twitter, and I see Elliot Friedman tweets out that Toronto has claimed Alexei Marchenko off waivers. And I swear to God, in my head, I said, I think we have too many defensemen. And then like 2 seconds after that thought finished in my head, my phone changed screens and Lou was calling me. And hey, Frankie, it's Lou. We've made a transaction today. We've acquired Alexei Marchenko, so you're going to be going on waivers today. So why don't you come see me when you get back to the hotel? And I was like, these guys tweeted out that Gilman's going on Wednesdays. Am I getting the Sekeres Lamorello call? Like, we've made a transaction, Frankie. We're having a new guest on Wednesdays.
Never.
I love how the name Alexei Marchenko is indelibly etched into your brain,
man.
right? Because there's no other reason to remember Alexei Marchenko.
Dude, right-hand shot defenseman. I'm like, I swear we have one of these.
Yeah, exactly.
A little too close to her
Oh, my
comfort.
goodness.
Yeah.
What'd you make of the Canucks last night, Frank?
Terrible start. Shilov's made some saves to keep them in it. And just it doesn't look connected right now as a team. And that's like a buzzword, I guess. But really, to me, what that means is like I don't see 5 players working in unison up and down the ice. I don't see them generating basically anything in transition or quickly off the rush. And to be honest with you, like the Bluger line with Suter and Sherwood, they get caught on the ice for 2 goals against with the Kucherov line. Like, yeah, it's on the road. You lose your matchups, but to have 2 happen, I think just from top to bottom, that's like, it's not a good performance. Like everyone's leaving the rink feeling crappy about that one. I think Shilov's early would have been happy with how he played, but there was just like there's not enough happening to convince yourself that Vancouver at any moment was going to win that game.
It looked like they were playing with different rules in the first period. Like it looked like one team was. I mean, I guess you could say that's because it's the home opener for one team, but a lot of the time the home opener first period for the team that's at home, it isn't that good. But they were maybe inspired by all the hurricane relief stuff, but. I mean, it was 2 different sports, I thought, in the opening 20 minutes.
Well, I think Tampa's a better team than people are maybe giving them credit for. And welcome to the Atlantic Division, where you have to play against Andrei Vasilevsky more often. Like, he's still got it, too. Like, quietly, we don't talk about him as much just because, maybe you want to call it a down year last year. But when you get to see that guy play live, you're like, okay, I understand the hype. So there's that. I think, if you just want to look at it from the Tampa point of view, like forgetting that Vancouver didn't play a very good game, did challenge Tampa. The 2 additions they made on the blue line, in McDonough and Moser. I think those are big for them. Like Moser seems like he's handling bigger minutes. Well, she played in Arizona anyways. McDonough, like, it kind of speaks for itself what he's done. They're big up front. Like I don't think they're a team that's going to go away quietly. And Jake Gensel looks pretty good on the top line as well. I will say, like, Vancouver deserved more calls in that game. Like there's a few that went uncalled, like a couple hookings. They probably deserved to have a power play, but even when they got the power play, I just, there wasn't much cooking really for the Canucks in any aspect of that game.
What have you seen out of Pettersson through 3 games?
I think last night there were some signs that maybe it's coming, but when I watch him play right now, I see a guy who's trying to think his way through it. Like nothing is instinctual about it for him. And is he overthinking it? He clearly cares, because if you are overthinking things, you do care. That's why you would overthink it. But just we talk about this all the time. He's not the fastest player, but he looks slow. Like when his decision making is slow, all of a sudden the feet look slow, and all those things I just said are not things you want to be saying about a guy who's making that much money, who's supposed to be, the premier player on your team, one of the premier players in the league. So I think last night, it looked like a step in the right direction for his game, but I just think everything's happening slow for him. Because he's overthinking things, and it feels like he's making the wrong decision more often than he should be.
Quinn's a -2 on the day, but he looked like he was gonna try to put everybody on his back and make something happen. The guy was everywhere.
Yeah, he was. I mean, he was doing his thing, and I think that's it's a testament to him where team can play a flat game and that guy still pops. And even the type of game that he plays where he has the puck on his stick so much, it would be so easy for him to be that Jekyll and Hyde kind of player where if things just aren't going well, it can fall off a cliff. Doesn't really happen for him. Like I'm always amazed at what he does and how often he can do it with a lot of success. So he was probably one of the few bright spots outside of Shilov's playing well early on in that game. But just, and then the D pairs get shuffled around, and we got to spread out the wealth a little bit last night. And I'm sure that's a big talking point with you guys today.
What do you think Shilov's is thinking that Rick Tocchet was very lukewarm on, like he didn't throw him under the bus. The words were fine, Rick Tocchet's review of Shilov's, but if you'd listen to the tone, it sounded like Tocchet wanted more from Shilov's, and really, he wasn't great. He didn't save them the game.
No.
But when you score once, you're not winning the hockey.
For sure. I think early he was fine. And here's the, like, if you looked on Money Puck today or yesterday, like the worst goalies in the league when it comes to goal save above expected, like Shilov's is in the bottom 5. So like it has not been a great start to the season for him. And the Canucks, when it comes to what they're giving up, have been one of the better defensive teams right now in the NHL. So, we can kind of come to the conclusion that he has not played to the level that they had hoped, or maybe to the level that he had played in the playoffs last year. And that poses a concern, because on a night like last night, where I don't know if you're asking too much of him, like ultimately all you want to do is have your goalie give you a chance to win, which, at the end of the day, it's a close game, although it doesn't feel that close when you're watching it, but the score was relatively close. You do have a chance to win. He's just not stealing you a game. But if he can find a way to get himself like to even when it comes to, goal save above expected, and just don't cost your team, then I think those lukewarm feelings feel a little more warm and fuzzy, which it doesn't feel warm and fuzzy right now around the Canucks net. And, certain things that may or may not be happening for the Canucks offensively.
Last week, you gave us your review on Erik Brannstrom, your former teammate in the Senators organization. He's been recalled here. I'm going to read you a tweet from our friend Dave Hall, who covers the Abbotsford Canucks for Canucks Army, and then ask you to respond. Dave writes, I'm very curious to see how Tocchet responds to Erik Brannstrom. In his 2 games with Abby, it almost felt that he was given the green light to run as a rover, hands and offensive creativity for days, but the total lack of defensive responsibility is very real. Does Tocchet have to make some accommodations here to integrate this player? How do you think that dynamic is going to work?
I actually think it's pretty simple. I think you like when that first interaction goes down and you bring the kid into your office, you tell them, we need someone who can move the puck, but I'm going to need you to kind of give a shit a little bit defensively as well. Like those, if you can do that, you're going to have a good chance of playing here more often than maybe you would have thought. And I think that's very attainable for Brannstrom because the skill is there. You guys have seen the clips going around in the AHL. Like, you know, he can move the puck. He's moved it in the NHL for quite a while now, and he's found a way to stick around. He had to find a way to stick around because he had to play some level of defense, although it's not prototypical third pair, you know, bigger, burlier guy defense. It's been good enough to play. So I think it's well within his grasp to do so. He's not going to be Quinn Hughes. He's not going to be, you know, run and gun. Ultimately, if he can alleviate some of the pressure by making a good first pass and maybe jumping in on the rush every once in a while, I think that's a home run for Erik Brannstrom. And just don't be a liability. And he's a smart enough guy that he can figure that out. The hard part is, can you execute it when, you know, things just aren't rolling as smooth for the team, you know, offensively. But he will add a much needed puck moving presence. And I will say I was wrong on the third pair being able to get by. Like they just haven't been able to. Whoever's been put in that situation has been hemmed in, hasn't been able to get through, you know, clean with breakouts and through the neutral zone. And that's a lot of the reason why you don't have success off the rush right now, because you know, it's pretty simple. Your defenseman can't get you the puck. How you gonna attack off the rush?
That was going to be my next question, Frank. One of the things I love about having Tocchet here is he really teaches you about the game. Well, it's one of the same reasons why we love having you on Wednesdays is your ability to communicate the X's and O's of the game. And Tocchet took us through what he's trying to do in training camp and preseason in generating more rush chances. And he explained that, you know, what they want is the offside winger to charge the middle of the ice. And then they either want to hit that guy with a outlet pass, or, you know, if the outlet pass doesn't quite connect, and, you know, you taught us last year that like 90+% of the plays drawn up on whiteboards by hockey coaches don't wind up working to a T because, you know, spontaneous bounces of a frozen rubber disc. But he was explaining that, look, if we hit the pass, great, because then we're going in the zone, and we're going in the zone with speed because the other winger is really tearing from the red line. And if we don't hit the pass, well, it works as a deflection. And we've got that other winger coming in with pace to either be first on the puck and forecheck. Sounds fantastic in theory and on paper, but do they have the defenseman to execute that outlet pass? And I think that's what we're starting to see here is that bottom four and making that pass is a difficulty.
Because what happens is if it gets bungled up, and you're talking about everyone's skating, right? Like everyone's skating in motion. And when it gets bungled up, all of a sudden now it's like a stop or a turn back. And now what's the other team doing? Now they're getting their gap and they're tight to you. And it's like, all that speed that you've created just got stifled because someone couldn't put the puck where they're supposed to. The other thing that, you know, the way Tocchet wants to do this, which is, you know, pretty standard, but with that forward coming across the ice, that is supposed to open up the far side of the ice for the defenseman to jump in, all that ice underneath. But if the pass isn't connecting, then the defenseman feels like he's got to hang back. And then you also have to realize, do you have the horses to kind of play that style of game? So if you have Brannstrom on one pair, theoretically, you have a guy who can either make that pass, and hopefully if he's not the guy making that pass, he can be the player jumping in on the far side so he can help, you know, kind of facilitate, because you need a fourth man in the rush now in the NHL. Like a three-man attack, unless the other team makes an egregious error, it's too hard. Like everyone has a lot of back pressure, and I think right now it's a little loose around the league, but pretty soon, like you're going to see that tighten up even more. So like it's imperative that you can get that fourth guy in. It's also imperative that the person who starts it, which is usually the defenseman, can put the puck in an area where it doesn't result in everyone having to stop and turn back and just stifling your own attack.
They're pretty sure they can mold Vinny Darnay, but I don't know how they're going to get the ice time to do that. Getting him through 82 games, I have no doubt that a remolded Vinny Darnay is possible for the playoffs or can be a part of your playoff plan, but it's back-to-back scratchings for him. The next, getting to the 10-game mark, it's going to be interesting to see how many games Darnay ends up getting under his belt.
I know he was good in Edmonton in the role that he played. Like I really do believe that.
As a distant number 6 sort of thing, you mean?
I guess like just a third pair guy.
Yeah.
And at times he had to pinch hit because Cody Ceci was maybe struggling and they would put him up and play in the top 4. And that never really lasted. Like that was, him playing out of his depth. But in the role that he played, it was fine. You didn't ask too much of him. The thing is, Vancouver's not asking too much of him. They just need him to be a third pairing defenseman. So I think maybe he's kind of working through a little bit as well. I also wonder this, okay, if I was a defenseman that played for Edmonton and I left that team to play somewhere else, not saying that Vancouver has a very significant skill drop off to Edmonton, but how different is it when, you're playing for the Oilers and it's just like, if you're out there with Connor or Leon, they can pretty much do whatever they want on the ice. Like how much of playing for the Oilers was just like, oh, Leon came, he's got it. Okay, we're good. Or, oh, Connor got it. Okay, we're good. Like how much easier does that make your life as a defenseman? I'd be curious to kind of, if I could go back and experience that, I would be curious to know that. But he feels like he's working through it. But I don't know. Like it makes me wonder also how underappreciated was Ian Cole in moving the puck. I know he struggled in the playoffs, like no doubt about that. But in the regular season, he would give you more puck moving ability lower in the lineup than what you're getting so far from the guys that are there, and Forbert and Desharnais and Jules.
Yeah. No, I think it's becoming clear. Another puck transporter, and we'll see what Brannstrom can do there. You made us smarter again, Francesco. Thank you for the time. We will catch up next Wednesday.
Thanks, Frank.
You guys are the best. Thanks for keeping me around.
Yeah. Some price from the Historic Wall Center. You can text us 778-402-9680. Email live at securesomeprice.com. All of it to the Great Clips inbox. Great Clips.
It's going to be great.
Indeed. Join us Saturday at Greta. We are having the first Canucks Army kickoff party for the 2024-25 season. It's all going down Saturday. Doors open at 3 p.m. Puck drop at 4 p.m. You get your tickets at nationgear.ca. It's in support of the BC Mental Health Foundation. We'll have prizes, trivia. We'll watch some hockey.